You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dmitri Vietze. I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors, a PR firm that focuses on music tech. And if you're paying any attention whatsoever, you know that Music Tectonics is diving in full force to pay attention to some of the most amazing things happening in music tech that are needed right now. We're in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis. Everyone's at home. Everyone's remote, working from home, playing from home, staying home, raising children at home. The world is upside down. However, there's still opportunities in music technology. We've been doing some episodes on live streaming. We're going to kick off some episodes on remote collaboration, on music making from wherever you happen to be. And so that makes me super excited to bring in Tim Exile, the founder of Endless. Tim, how are you doing, man?
I'm very, very well. All considering, very, very well indeed. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm spiritually surviving. I'm personally thriving. The industry is quite an interesting place to be, and it makes me really excited to have this conversation because of what you do. You are Tim Exile. You're an artist turned founder of a music tech startup, Endless. And how would you describe that to someone who's never seen it?
So Endless is it's a multiplayer, collaborative, live music making platform, an app. Our first product is actually launching on Tuesday, the 31st of March. It's an iOS app obviously for iPhones and iPads, and it basically allows you to jam together remotely, live with anyone in the world. And that's the really unique thing at the moment. That's the thing that really stands out because. In many ways, there are plenty of collaborative music making tools around, but they generally work on a more kind of Google Docs approach where, you have a bunch of people editing one kind of document, whereas our approach is music making as a conversation. So I make a riff, I send it to someone, or they get it automatically, actually, and then they can remix that riff, send their own riff back, and send it on to someone else. And so it unfolds like a conversation, almost like a chat room.
Wow. So we'll get a little bit more into the details of what that means, but where did you come from and why did you build this app?
So I was an artist. I spent 10 years as a recording artist. I had a multi-album record deal with a great electronic music label called Warp Records, also home to Aphex Twin and Square Pusher, and some of my favorite artists. I was lucky enough to get signed to my favorite record label, but which is wonderful. I mean, very, very lucky
Amazing.
For that to happen. But, I started my musical life as a violinist. And what I loved about the violin is that you put your bow on the string, you move your body, music happens, and then when you stop moving your body, the music stops. So it's a very embodied way of making music. And then, flash forward 5 years or so, I fell in love with electronic music. And I fell in love with that sound word. And I immediately knew that's what I wanted to do. But you just didn't have that embodied way of making electronic music, particularly when I started making it, which is in the sort of mid to late 90s. So I started to build my own instruments. I wanted to find a way to improvise electronic music in a way that would be engaging for me and then engaging for other people. And I basically seeded into building technology products, building digital instruments. And I tried to carve a career as a kind of improvising electronic musician. And it was good, but it just wasn't as fulfilling as I wanted it to be. And there was a kind of sort of road to Damascus moment at one point where I realized that the guy who was having the most fun in the room at these shows that I was doing was me. And that actually the opportunity for this technology wasn't for me to build an artistic career, an artist career off the back of it. The opportunity was to put this technology in the hands of other people and allow other people to have the kind of experience that I was having. And then to allow that to happen, online, live, remotely, which has been one of the biggest challenges for the music creation tech industry for a long time.
Wow, I gotta back up there. That's pretty interesting jump to go from being the guy who's on stage performing, got a record label deal, thinking about it through the lens of a label wanting to sell music, to saying, you know what, actually this isn't about selling music, it's about making music and getting those fans, those customers, those consumers, those listeners to make the music. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Although I suppose from the first person perspective, it's like I think if I've if I'm really honest with myself, I've never really seen much of a difference between listening, being a creator and a consumer. But that's a kind of privileged perspective that you get when you're an artist. You sort of feel as a so-called artist, one of these very small elite of people who get to make the music that we all listen to on Spotify. You're plugged into these scenes where you very much kind of exchange ideas and you listen to each other's you listen to each other's music and you support each other and you support each other's album releases and you go on tour with them, and it's conversational. You don't really feel this huge kind of, you don't feel defensive about being either a creator or a listener.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So let's get into this. What you think it's possible for us to hear the app, and then we can talk more about how it works and where you're going with it?
Yeah, sure. So I do a live demo here. So I've got my iPad in front of me with the app open. Probably the easiest thing to do now is actually I'll just sample something from what I'm saying right now. I'll just grab it.
Sample something from
and it should be
saying right now. I'll just grab sample something
playing back
from what I'm saying right now.
Right.
Sample something from,
so I can go. What I'll do is
right
I'll start to chip into that and turn that into something maybe a bit more musical. And say I'll sample that. We're already getting into the weird zone, but I can. So already I've taken something quite kind of abstract and turned it into a synth line. And now I've got some drums here that I can just lay down on top of it. So I'm working into the loops as I go, and so I'm gonna give that synth line a bit more grit, and so I'll put it through a reverb, and then say So I'm just creating as I go. It's very much about free-form improvisation, and taking it. It's kind of based on happenstance, and so every single thing that I did there, if I'd been in a public jam, which I wasn't, obviously I'm in a private jam right now, but I would those riffs would automatically be shared with sorry, there's like loads of cheering going on outside. It's really, I think, so it's
everyone else.
8 p.m. here. I think there's a big organized like applause for sorry. Yeah, so
are people cheering outside of the windows?
I think it's
or
one
just
of those
on the
window-to-window things. It must be.
Is this one of those window-to-window things?
I'm in a big block of flats, and there's a bunch of people with balconies facing this kind of park that we've got between all the buildings. So, man, I should have sampled that.
Wow, this is real. This is real time, real life. This is what happens in a pandemic. People are desperate for human connection and to make some noise.
They really are. Yeah. It's very, very strange times.
So you were saying that that if that had been in a public jam, they would get those riffs, and then in like if they're across the world and they're getting those riffs, are they then layering on top of that?
Yeah. So too, why don't I'll just pop into one of the public jams right now. So now I'm on the homepage of the app, where all the community jams are, and we've got a jam called 140 BPM Techno Acid. So I'm going to dive in there, and I have zero idea what's going on in there right now. All I know is that someone left a riff in there about 3 minutes ago. So just booting this jam up right now, and so here we go. We've got some pretty brutal kind of like acid techno jam going on. So I can dive into this jam right now. One thing that I'm a big fan of techno claps. I'm just going to whack on some beefy techno claps. So you can hear me layering that clap on. I now sent that to the whole group. So if there's someone on like in this jam right now, then I might get that riff back with the claps kind of remixed or something. But I'm just going to keep on playing. I'm going to. So I mean, we're already in chaos zone already. Actually, you know what? I'm going to roll back to those previous hats. I'm going to put some hi-hats on. Maybe put some different notes over the top. So yeah, okay, I'm going to dive out of that jam into another jam now and see. So there's a getting started with Endless jam, which can be interesting because it's a mixture of people who are literally trying out their first riffs, but then you get some of the more experienced people coming in and like telling people how to do it. So this is actually, this is not bad stuff. Yeah,
pretty good.
So this is stuff that's all made with the app. And so we've got a whole bunch of users. I can dive in and like in the mixer page, I can see all the levels, and I can instantly see that we've got. So there's two people who've collaborated on this, and from different different sides of the Atlantic. And I can go back in time. I can kind of hear like the genesis of this jam. So I'm kind of going back in time now.
So you can actually take off certain instruments or tracks.
Yeah. So I could say I'll go to this bit, this riff here, and let's say I'll mute the drums, and let's say I can replace those with some more kind of like. I'll turn the tempo up a little bit, and I'll. So I've changed up the drums there. I'm playing some more hats in. Kind of remixing the hats a bit.
So they're over there saying, "What are you doing in my jam over here, man? You speeding it up."
Exactly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll back to what the person before me was doing, and then I'm going to resend that riff because it's kind of, people get very very specific about kind of the etiquette. Because there is, it's like a conversation. So in a conversation, if you just like bowl in with a complete change of topic, everyone's just like, dude, and it's very much the same with Endless. If there's a bunch of people kind of riffing away and they're really they're really kind of locked into a flow, and then someone comes in and starts, well, basically like musically shit posting, then people, they like to defend the etiquette.
Yeah. Let me ask you some questions about what we just did there. So you're on an iPad there. First, you started a bit of, you sampled yourself and did a little jam or remixed that, sped it up, and then built a jam around that. Then we've gone into two different jams. First was the Techno Acid one, and then there was the New People. I don't remember what you called that, but and then you were able to go back in time on the jam to basically pull parts off and then add new parts, speed it up, and change it around. And you're saying there's some etiquette around, whether you change it up significantly without kind of getting some interaction from some of the original players. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very much right. And I think that's one of the things I get really excited about Endless is that etiquette is a kind of signifier of culture. You don't really have culture without etiquette, without sort of kind of behavioral tropes that kind of identify you with a certain group or a certain tribe. And so I feel there's a really strong culture of kind of how people expect people to behave, and how, say, more experienced members of the community will want to kind of educate new people when new people sort of come through the door and fall into the rabbit hole of Endless and discover the community and start to build friendships. Then the etiquette kind of propagates as the relationships propagate.
Let me ask you a slightly technical question. So when you think about remote collaboration across, distances with an app or a platform, latency is always an issue. My understanding is that this is actually asynchronous, but it's tight enough back and forth that it gets close to feeling synchronous, especially with a loop-based medium, right? And so really it's almost like you're sending this, you're putting this in the cloud, you're putting your riff, your loop in the cloud, maybe with several layers on it. And then when somebody else is on their mobile device, they get it, they start adding stuff. You don't actually hear it instantly while they're playing, do you? There must be a gap between when they add something and you add something, but then if they add something right after, you guys are still working off the same kind of master document, let's say.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, technically speaking, we use a similar database technology to what Dropbox is built off. It's heavily modified for our purpose because there was a lot of mods we had to do to that to get it to work in a musical context. But essentially, it's very similar. So, I mean, making music together live over live streaming doesn't work because the latency needs to be absolutely immediate. It needs to be sub 20 milliseconds, and that with current technology might be possible with 5G, but it's definitely not possible with what we've got currently. But obviously, now we're doing this podcast using Zencaster, and so we're conversing over over the Atlantic, and I think the latency with VoIP is usually in the region of maybe sort of 300 to 500 milliseconds. And when you're in a conversation, that's kind of fine. And what I find really interesting is that the way Endless works is more conversational. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in sync with each other, but it just has to be real time enough. So the latency is usually takes about, similar to VoIP. It's like 300 to 500 milliseconds for someone to send and receive a riff over the internet. And that's enough for it to feel, it feels real time. And I think what the point of real time is that it just needs to feel conversation. It needs to feel that you can respond in a timely manner to what your fellow jammers have done, really.
But technically, if there's 5 people in a jam with the latency, those 5 people are pulling this master track and then tweaking at the same time. They're actually working on 5 separate tracks, and then when they shoot it back to the cloud, it kind of has to merge those pieces on layers onto that master track. Is that right? So
you're actually working on individual documents. So it works very much like a chat room. But instead of each new message being just a completely original message, each message is a remix of one of the previous messages in the chat. So let's say you start working, someone sends a riff, and you start working into that riff, adding a layer on it, and then you send that riff back as a new riff. Then no merging has to take place on the server. It's literally just what is the latest thing that's been sent.
So if you're working on riff A and I'm working on riff A at the same time, and you make riff A 2.0 and I make riff A 2.1 or something like that, does it just takes each edition as a layer on top. It doesn't actually ingest your combined track. It's just ingesting your layer, and then it's ingesting my layer separately.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll both arrive. Okay. So imagine that there's chat messages. So it just depends, like who sent the message first. Depends. It dictates the order that they arrive in. So sometimes, if there are a lot of people kind of furiously jamming away together, then you can get into these kind of like conflicts. But generally, people it's like if you're in a big chat room, there's loads of people sending messages. It kind of sucks. So this is where the etiquette comes in. People's first experience, what we've found from talking to users as they've as they've kind of got onboarded into how to create and jam with others on Endless, that their first experience is just like they make a riff, they post something, and then it comes back 5-10 seconds later and someone's remixed it, and they're just like completely mind blown. They're just, wow. So someone on the other side of the world has just taken my bit of music and responded to me musically. And from there, they then, that's the hook. That's what hooks people into making more music with Endless. And then, they want to play ball. They don't want to shout over each other,
Right. Yeah. So you've been in beta, and just now, as of March 31st, you're actually launching an iOS, iPhone, iPad.
Yes.
How have people been using the app so far? Is this purely like experimentation? Are people actually exporting music and doing other stuff with it? Tell us about all the ways people are using it.
So there's a number of ways. I'd say our core community have the people who really spend hours a day in the app it's kind of become a bit of a new religion for them in a way. I mean, there's a lot of stories about people who kind of came for the tool, stayed for the network. So they were just like, okay, this is going to be an interesting tool that I can like maybe bash around some ideas with some friends and then export them all to Ableton and turn them into tracks. Flash forward 2 weeks and they haven't opened Ableton for 2 weeks. And so I think there's a very specific group. The people who use Endless most, I'd say, are people who basically have always wanted to have a musical life, but have kind of been caught between this kind of artificial divide between listeners and creators, and they're not really bothered with making finished records, but they do want to be musical. They're musically gifted. They might have a musical training, and that they're community minded, and they love doing stuff with people. And I say those are our top users. Then we have a lot of people who do kind of dive in every now and again to because it's convenient and it's quite deep. It allows you to, because you can kind of keep on remixing riffs and really working into the sound, you can actually get some very high quality sounding music quite quickly. So there's another kind of cohorts who use it like that, who do still generate ideas which they then take out of Endless and import them into Ableton and Cubase and Logic and Pro Tools and so on to create music from. And then I'd say there's kind of like more kind of gamer style people, I'd say, who just like to mess around, who just like the experience of it, and maybe kind of less concerned with the quality or even the etiquette, and maybe kind of just play around. People for whom it occupies the Candy Crush time, but without that sort of feeling that you've just literally thrown half an hour down the drain. You still have, after half an hour, you come away with a whole bunch of riffs which you're quite happy with, and maybe they'll share them to social media.
And are people doing that? Are they sharing it to social media?
Yeah, there are quite a few people. If you follow Endless FM on Instagram and Twitter, you'll see we quite often retweet these. Actually, one of the artists who we work with quite closely, and who's a big supporter of us, this guy called Flux Pavilion, who you may well have heard of. He's quite a well-known EDM producer, and currently he's started completely off his own back. He started this initiative called March of the Endless, where he created 31 individual little riffs, just purely within the riff, or purely within Endless, and he's posting one of those every day for the month of March. So I'd highly recommend following Flux Pavilion and listening to some of the stuff he's doing. It's incredible. I mean, a lot of his fans have been asking for those ideas to be turned into full releases.
Has he not yet put them out on SoundCloud or Spotify or anything like that?
No, well, this is the really interesting thing. It's that they just so far they exist as ideas, and I'd say I don't know. I need to check in with him and actually see how he feels, how his audience have responded to it, and whether he'd then want to kind of take those ideas and then turn them into commercial releases. Because I know I've seen a few comments on them. People are just like, "Man, when is this going to be? Yeah, when's the full version going to be on Spotify?" But what's interesting here is I think that this small unit of music, just the little idea, the little riff that, has the same function as say, a tweet or an Instagram post, that it's more a document of a moment rather than necessarily a piece of kind of long tail content in its own right.
What happens with the rights, the splits on a riff that has multiple collaborators, and then somebody exports it? Do you have a way of managing? Dare I ask this question on a podcast? Do you have a way of managing this?
Yeah. Well, so I mean, we're completely straight up. We just don't. We're an early stage startup. We don't have the technical resources to fully solve this problem, but we have a plan, and what we're aiming to do, it tracks authorship through the platform. It doesn't track it with the resolution we'd like to track it currently, and there are some instances where, let's basically, if you remix someone's layer, then that layer then gets attributed to you, and what we're working on next is an algorithm that then creates splits even within the layers. So each riff can have up to 8 layers. We're getting into the technical weeds here, but basically we currently track authorship to a certain degree through the platform. The license agreement for Endless is you own the stuff you do on Endless, and you give Endless and everyone else on the platform a license to do whatever they want to do with your stuff on Endless. But that's a sandbox. So Endless is basically a sandbox, and it's very safe because we track the authorship. And at some point, we don't have this in at the moment, but at some point we'll have, very kind of granular permissions, and you can be very precise about who you'll allow to export your stuff, in what condition, under what license agreements you'll allow people to export stuff, or maybe you won't allow them to export stuff at all. And, all that will be managed, and all that is incoming. And that's actually it's very exciting for us, because I think there are big technical hurdles to really kind of free-flowing collaboration, which I feel we've certainly got some good solutions for. But then there are big kind of legal and rights issues around this, and we want to solve them both, because ultimately we want people to feel safe that they can just collaborate with anyone, anywhere, and basically, we've got you, we've got your back. If you want to carefully manage your rights, you can do it. If you don't care and you just want to interact with people, and that's how you see the value of music, then also, we've got you as well.
Yeah. Is there anything happening on the app that you did not expect in terms of community use? Or to flip it, any interesting things that have come? I mean, you've talked a little bit about it. Are there any other just like, oh wow, that's cool? I
mean, there's some really, really stunning music that's been made. I think the best story we have is that there's a band who met on Endless, just jamming together in the public jams. They're based in the UK, US, Canada, and Sweden. They've never met in person, and they've written a full record together on Endless. I mean, they took it out and did a bit of editing in Ableton, but the music itself was written on Endless, and we're going to be releasing it shortly. We've helped them get it mastered, and that's going to be going on Spotify soon. And that's really quite thrilling. That's a story that every time I tell it, I slightly have to kind of like, I do get a bit emotional about it, because even listening to the music, and the music is really good as well, and just to think that these people have created meaningful music around meaningful relationships that have been brokered by Endless and the community that's sprung up around it.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I was hoping that we'd see, musical instruments and platforms and apps like yours start to do more of that. And it's so cool how you've sort of sidestepped the latency thing by being based on loops, still allowing for full-on collaboration with people who are nowhere near each other, could never really be in the same room, and now you've got a whole band from 4 different countries. That's very cool. Let's talk about what's going on with the current COVID-19 crisis and all the self-isolation. I know you're in beta, so you have a limited number of users. Are you seeing any early indication of people ramping up their remote collaboration right now under the circumstances of quarantines and lock-ins and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've just got a few thousand users, or a few thousand installs of the app, so it's tiny numbers at the moment still. But we're seeing a huge amount of interest also, our daily user numbers are just going up. And this is amongst a community that hasn't. I mean, there are ways for people to invite each other, but it's hard. It's hard to get on the beta. It's not. I mean, that's going to change on Tuesday once we're in the App Store. But we're seeing a lot of interest. We're seeing a lot of old users coming back to collaborate. We're seeing people spend more time in the app. We're seeing more and more hourly users. Yeah, I mean, it's ticking up. It's hard. In some ways, it's hard to separate that from. We are approaching launch. The product is getting better. There's certainly a lot of interest in what we're doing now, specifically in the last week or two.
Yeah. That makes sense for a lot of reasons. In fact, it brings the question of, the entire world economy is kind of grinding to a halt. And here you are launching this thing, but I actually think it might be the perfect time to launch. What's been going through your head as a founder who's been building up for so long? I mean, we met at Meetum Lab, where you won Meetum Lab startup competition in 2019. Was that last June? Yeah, I think so.
It was last year. Yeah, last June. Yeah.
Yeah. And you already had a very well-functioning product at that point. What's been going on in your head of, here's my launch time, and then the world starts going up in flames? Well, not literally, but emotionally.
Emotionally, yeah. No, it's very, very weird for us. I mean, obviously my background is as a musician, and my social timelines are full of people whose livelihood has just disappeared. I've got my very good friend. I mean, actually, very good friend, the guy who basically got me to at least introduced me to Warp in the first place. His agency is under mortal threat, and he runs a big booking agency, and so all that's going on one side. But then we're just about to launch this product that is kind of exactly the right product at exactly the right time, and I feel humbled. I think I feel a sense of like service, weirdly, that now, okay, it's not, under normal operating conditions, you're a startup, you're just like, go launch this, get users, like get investors, go win, play this whole game. But now it's the whole tone around the thing feels it's like, okay, now it feels a little bit like we're becoming a sort of public service. I mean, it's not, we're by no means key workers, but I think, what we're offering, as we've heard from our community on Discord, that it's actually providing some solace for people. So for that, I feel humbled and grateful in a weird way, and kind of moved.
Yeah, hey man, it's why you're doing it, right?
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah, and it's just that sense of purpose. I think it can be easy as a founder. When you go through all the hurdles and all the obstacles and all the crises and all the near-death experiences that you go through, to kind of lose that sense of purpose about what you're doing. But at a time like this, it comes flooding back. Really does.
Yeah, that's intense, man. It brings a new meaning to captive audience, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So, do you think in the bigger picture, as more people make their own music, they'll be more or less interested in listening to commercial releases?
I don't think so at all. I looked to my musician friends as an example of this. My musician friends listen to more music than my non-musician friends. So, and sort of harking back to what I was saying earlier, I think once you adopt a more kind of creative mindset around any medium, your interest in the medium goes up, whether it's what you create or what other people create. Your sense of your kind of aesthetic bandwidth kind of goes up. So I think, as we've seen with video, now everyone's a videographer to some extent. The level of appreciation of film, I mean, the entire world of the moving image is much bigger. The whole industry has grown off the back of that. So I strongly believe that music creation and listening is definitely the opposite of a zero-sum game. It's an infinite sum game. No, that's kind of over-egging it a bit.
So we'll talk a little bit at the end here about how people can get involved and try out the app. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what is your monetization model for Endless?
So we at launch on Tuesday, there's a premium subscription service. We've decided in the current climate that we're actually going to make it free for 2 months. We're originally going to do a 7-day trial period for the subscription, but we're just, we've sort of we've been born into a give first world, and that's really important. So the entire app is going to be free for the first 2 months for everyone. But then it's going to be it's a $4.49 per month subscription, and that gets you on the Infinite subscription tier, which gives you an extra library of sound packs that's updated regularly. It also gives you infinite recall of all the jams you're in, so you can go back to the year dot when the jam started and listen back to everything. If you're not on the Infinite tier, you can listen to the most recent stuff, but it's like Slack. You sort of pay for the infinite recall. We're also working on. We've got some announcements coming soon about other platforms and other services that we're rolling out, but we're focusing what we're talking about for now on the mobile app and how we're going to monetize. We're also talking to to manufacturers and artists about ways that we can use the platform to expose them to new audiences, new fans, and that's particularly interesting for us because we, in the long run, we'd like to be a marketplace of some sort where the top creators on the platform can generate revenue, where manufacturers who make the products that people can use with Endless can find new users, find new customers, and then also people can license content from the users on the platform, etc. So we're looking at multiple different revenue streams at the moment. But the first one is it's more of a sort of pay to play thing.
It's the new 360 degrees of the music industry. It used to be about artists, and now it's about marketplaces.
Yes, yeah, it is. But the thing is, marketplaces where if you really do a marketplace well, you can really build a community around it. And I think we're past the days where you can really build a strong kind of purpose-led community that just has around kind of one-way monetization. Really, I think there needs to be some kind of revolving door that allows people to be consumers and creators on the same platform.
Love it. So if people want to try out the app, Endless has 3 S's at the end. Endless, right? And they can just look you up on March 31st, right? In the App Store.
Yes. So you can head to endless with 3 S's.fm. You can sign up to our mailing list. And then, but obviously in the App Store, we're going to be in the App Store 31st of March in the morning. If you get on our mailing list, then we'll send you a notification and a reminder. But yeah, come grab the app. I don't actually know when the podcast is going out.
It's probably going to be around April 1st. So
right.
By the time this is up, people can find it. But that's cool. Tim, this has been super fun. I wonder if you might take us out with a jam, but let me first say thank you for listening to the Music Tectonics podcast. Please hit subscribe. We're going to keep this series going. I guess now maybe we should have #captive audience for the whole series about live streaming, collaborative music, remote music, music education from afar. We've got captive audience going out. So hit subscribe, go to musictectonics.com to sign up for our newsletter, find out about our weekly Webs Days. We're now doing every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. We're doing meetups for the entire month of April. We may continue beyond that. So we'll be doing some stuff on live streaming and remote music and so forth there. So keep listening. Tim, you think you could take us out on a jam?
I will. I certainly will. So I'm actually going to dive into a jam, one of our community jams called Hollow Earth, which is set up by one of our top users who's a big Tom York fan. And she set up this jam as a kind of like homage to Tom York, but I'm just going to go in there, pick up the latest thing that's been done, and iterate on a few riffs, and maybe browse back through any other stuff that's been going on. So
awesome! Thanks so much, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks, Dmitri.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.